Hello, everybody, and welcome to Atop my mountain, atop Derek's mountain, where we play games and do the geek stuff and stuff. And this is another wonderful installment of NPCS All Podcast, and I'm joined by some of the greatest people that I know.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shanti Ali. I am a content creator, podcast host, and you'll probably learn a little bit more about me as we get into it.
It is Black History Month and the first day of, and we are going to talk about black representation inside of media and gaming as a whole and pop culture. Shanti, tell me a little bit more about your educational background, please.
Went to Stoughton High for about 2 years, transferred to Cardinal Spellman. After that, I went and got my bachelor's degree in biochemistry and molecular biology with the minor in microbiology, and then took a 2-year hiatus. And then after that, went back to school, went to Tuskegee University in Alabama, and I received my master's in public health. And while I was there, I managed to get an article published, and I also presented twice at the CDC.
Oh, hell yeah. I didn't know about that. You presented twice at the CDC?
Yes, it was like a competition for emerging scholars. The first year it was a poster presentation, and then the second year they actually had us on stage, like presenting our work in front of the entire world. So it was nerve-wracking. Thank you for inviting me. As soon when you told me that you wanted me to come on, I was kind of just like, I mean, what do you want me to say? Like, I'll probably get you canceled.
What do you guys think about white characters being portrayed as, or being played by black folk inside of media? How does it affect consuming it, or how does it affect you when watching it?
Historically, are we saying they've been characters who are white or people in history?
We could talk about Superman, and then I guess if they wanted to make Abraham Lincoln black, which would be a wild concept.
Hey, what's your name? My name's Lamar Lincoln.
No, it would be Abraham. I'm just like, okay.
So Abraham Lincoln in a dashiki, bro? Give me that all day.
Oh, dashiki has a kufi on?
Yeah, so for historical, I think there's just too many stories that haven't been told. I would rather all of these stories where, one, we get stories where the white guy is the good guy and he wasn't. Like, we just need to go back and retell those stories with the right hero in mind. On the other side of characters who are usually white, I prefer the Miles Morales treatment. You know, give me Black Spider-Man, but make him a character where now we get to explore what made him that way in a society that makes sense, rather than just color swapping.
On the second part, I agree with you, because I'll say from a writing standpoint, now, granted, I'm not a writer, it's low-key lazy to just like take Superman and just make him black and not change anything. To do that for the sake of saying, it's like, oh, he's black now, representation. How about the fact that Superman, because he's black, might have to deal with the police? What happens when they shoot him? He's got a weapon.
Flying.
It's a cape.
Yeah.
I honestly do think that it does more of a disservice for the sake of representation if you just cast someone, like when they do live action superhero movies and they're just like, well, when I mean historically, I mean like since the creation of that character, they've been white, and then you just put a black person in there or anybody of a different race or ethnicity, and then just say like, oh, well, it's the same person, but we just did this because of X, Y, and Z. That's where I think it really does hinder the conversation, because you're not really telling our stories. You're telling your story through us. Yeah. So it's like blackface with extra steps.
Marvel does it well. I think anytime they introduce a character that is from a different culture, that they always bring in the world's issues. Like, for example, like mutants were designed pretty much off of the struggles of the civil rights movement.
Civil rights movement.
Right. So like that, you know, I don't think that innately they are whitewashing, like, and it's weird because you could argue the point, right? You could argue the fact that because they make the mutants and most of the mutant cast is that of, you know, a not darker complexion, that they are more or less taking the concept of our struggles and capitalizing on it, which I think personally the struggle of mutant and humans being brought to a medium of an audience that doesn't understand the concept in their brain socially about racism, about, you know, segregation, about stereotyping one another, it brings that conversation to mind. Any person that I talk to that reads a X-Men comic or reads the X-Men comics, their mindset is completely different than somebody else that reads just the Avengers, because the discussion is so palpable in those comic books.
With X-Men, it's like they took it, even though it is like a predominantly white cast, it's talking about a black issue in a way that like people can understand it without having that race component that we've been ingrained with come in and alter how you see it. That's why like I was saying before with Attack on Titan, I think there's like 2 black people in it. That show talks about racism, bigotry, prejudice, all of that stuff, and like the effects that it has on adults and children growing up in that type of society. And people are able to have conversation about Attack on Titan and have that be so nuanced. But then when I just insert real black people, then it's just like, whoa, we don't know anything. It wasn't from like a malicious place. It was from just a place of ignorance. And I think is that a lot of times is that people don't understand the difference between ignorance and stupidity. For me, ignorance is just lack of knowledge. Stupidity is having the knowledge and choosing not to accept it.
I think one thing is this really leads you to representation in the writing room, because representation is important on screen, but it means very little if you don't have those stories being told by people who actually know what they're talking about. And stereotypes are in everything because it's just so easy to make a lot of the minor characters, and we've kind of fallen into a trap of like a bunch of white people writing the black stereotypes. So instead of it being like someone from Boston, imagine it's just a white person. Like, it's just gotten so broad that it's grouping people together that it ignores everything because they just don't understand the experience.
I would push for it's just like if you're writing a movie or a show about like Nigerian people, go and hire a Nigerian writer. Having a consultant is good. You can make recommendations, and then it's up to the people whether or not they take your feedback. But when you're a writer, you have more leeway with it, so that it's like you can say this. You can essentially say it's like, nah, we're not going to put that in there because that's not how that works. It's about having more autonomy over the stories that you're able to tell. You're getting an authentic story, but then also you're helping a writer that might not have had the opportunities that some white writers might have had get into those spaces. I'm against hiring someone just because they come from that culture. You have to have competency with it as well.
Thank you, Cabbage and Potatoes, for the follow. Man, God, speaking of cabbage and potatoes, St. Patty's Day is coming up. I can't wait to have just endless amount. What is that great meal my wife makes that I can't remember the name of? It's like a leafy green and a meat. Help me out here. Thanks. Corned beef and cabbage. Corned beef and cabbage. There it is. That's the one I'm thinking of.
Cabbage.
Yeah, corned beef and cabbage.
I insulted my ancestors with not thinking of that one.
Shame.
You know, my father was a potato.
Yeah. My fucking ancestor was a piece of corn, dude. I look at chat real quick. By the way, hello everybody. And Chief puts in there, what if Robert Downey Jr. played Will Smith's role in Emancipation? We all know he can pull off a black dude, but nobody's trying to see him as that character. But nobody minds RDJ in Tropic Thunder because it's not a real black character.
First of all, he did amazing in Tropic Thunder.
It feels weird because, like, as a black man, right, watching that film, I didn't see Robert Downey Jr. wearing blackface. Like, that was the weirdest part. It just didn't seem it. It just felt so natural in its state, and his way of being able just to play the role itself was amazing. I think that he deserved a medal for that. If there was more, and I feel like, honestly, I don't think that could ever happen again. I don't think in our
Never.
social climate that it would. I think that came like literally at the right time. Not many black folk can put on whiteface. But then again, I say that, and the first movie that comes to my mind is White Chicks. The Wayans brothers killed that role. At no point in time did I feel like it was like they're putting on whiteface. Like, I think that comedy itself is subjective, right? And Dave Chappelle, yeah, Dave Chappelle. I think Dave Chappelle might cross some lines and whatnot, but it's still great. But I think the one thing that I enjoy about comedy is that comedy is subjective, you know, and comedy itself is you pull a lot of yourself out of comedy, and the people that can't do that shouldn't be watching comedy. So something like Tropic Thunder works, something like White Chicks works, but if you try to do that in like a serious drama or whatever, gone. It's never gonna flow. It's never gonna be it.
I also feel like with Tropic Thunder, like it worked because it was a satire of like the whole acting like community. It's like how people will like with Robert Downey Jr.'s character. It's just like the method actor, how they dive too far into it. It's just like, okay, it's like you really didn't have to get like skin pigmentation surgery and like hair implants and stuff like that. It's like that's a little bit too much. And I think it's just like they set the scene so that everyone knows that it's a joke.
Do you think minorities, preferably black folk, or even to bring off the conversation beyond just black folk too, do you think that they should have their own spheres in media? How do you feel about BET?
You mean Black Evil Television?
I got reverse Venalago.
At the beginning of it, when it was created, I think it was doing some good things. I think now that it got bought out, we have the same problem that we do in white media. Yes, there are some people that like find it funny and it's like everything like that. I think it's just very reductive. The sitcoms that they have, the reality TV shows that they have on there, it's just, for me, when I look at it, it reinforces all the things that white people say about us.
Yeah.
I do acknowledge and commend them on the fact that they are giving a lot of black people jobs.
Yeah.
Like, I detest Tyler Perry movies, but he hires a lot of black people.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, so, and he's giving a lot of black actors, a lot of black producers, writers, opportunities that in a different, in a larger sphere, they might not have had. So yeah. I think that it is good. I just feel like we just need better content.
I think the spheres overall can be over encompassing, but you know, I want to make sure that we can go through, you know, some of these spheres. Like for example, you know, something like reality television and everything else in between, and that could have a home. You know, you take the home network, right? Like we wouldn't have a black home network channel. That wouldn't go. It wouldn't flow. But having shows that involve going to black neighborhoods with a black host, right? Going to their homes and helping out black communities and their families. So maybe it's strictly, I won't want to say like you go to the poverty-filled areas or just the places that need help. I'll bet that be schools or whatever it is. Like,
are you talking about Pimp My House?
My name's Exhibit, and I'm about to come in there and pimp your house.
Yo, I heard you like cars, so guess what? I put your house on 22s.
BET can work on what it needs to work on. I would love to see, you know, full black cartoons.
Oh, a black science channel.
A black science channel. Brilliant. Black education, black science, black art.
Are you saying more channels or more networks or channel shows on these channels? So like you'll have like a blackout on, or like I was gonna say black hole special, but you're gonna like have, like a blackout on the science channel, where it's just like, hey, on these days, like we're highlighting like black astrophysicists,
yeah,
people that are in. So you're saying more so that. I think what BET did is like they looked at what is and made something. I think what we're talking about is what ought to be. The utility of BET, which they don't actually utilize, is that if someone has a really good like black cooking show idea and they're not being picked up by these other places, they should be the ones to pick it up. You went out into the world and tried to like you tried. They just said no. It's just like, but what you have is actually good. Like, come to us. We might not be able to pay you as much. It's like, but from there you can get a start and like start building up.
Only thing is, I would say I think the change has to start from the top, not the bottom. Or like, it's great to have black actors and writers and keep moving up, but start at the CEOs, creative directors. Like, that's where the change has to start, and then the rest can come more naturally.
Well, Luke, could I push back on you on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you brought up that earlier about the capitalistic society that we live in. So wouldn't the market drive that? So wouldn't it have to start at the bottom, like people not going to these shows or watching these movies? Wouldn't it have a bigger impact trying to influence their bottom line than influence their mind?
Definitely, but I feel like we are already in a society which is one monopolistic, where it's harder for smaller groups to have to get together and make those changes. Where you're right, if we could reshape America, absolutely we need to demolish the top in general and start to create more equality across the field. But in the same way, I don't like Amazon, but if Amazon unionized, that would be the biggest union in America, and I would support that. So you're right, but maybe I'm doing the BET approach of this is the system we've got. Maybe this will work. But yeah, you're 100% right.
What game do you think has done representation the best for the culture, for the Black community overall? And what is something you want to see more done with inside of that verse of gaming?
Assassin's Creed Origins. First of all, didn't cast Gerard Butler as the main person. But it, like, first of all, is like seeing a like darker skinned person in that time period, because the prevailing thought is that the people that are there now, they think that like those are the people that built the pyramids. And if you know anything about history, you would know that it's like for thousands of years, Egypt has been like invaded by multiple people. So like the population of the people, well, the complexion and the look of the people have changed over time. So seeing something like that, especially like when they're going that far back in time and seeing an accurate depiction of what that person would look like. And that's not saying that if anyone has played the game, not everyone in there is Black. They have Greeks, they have like so many different people in there because of where it geographically is. It was a melting pot. But it seems like when achievements are attributed to the Egyptians, they always try to paint it as it's like someone that looks more European. So that's why I think that it did a great job. It also got a lot of things right in terms of their spirituality and religious systems, and the visuals of it were just amazing. If I was a 8-year-old kid playing this game, it would have had an impact on me. I would honestly love to see like a God of War type of game, but with Egyptian gods. You're playing as Horus, so you already have like a template of a struggle story, because Set killed Osiris, Horus's father, and the thing was, it's a redemption for him to get revenge for his father. So you brought up Elden Ring, and with a lot of these games, you're able to make your own character. How do you feel about the representation in character creation in video games?
I don't even, you know what? It's one of those things where if I could play Elder Scrolls Oblivion and put dreadlocks on a character, or like put braids in a character, then I should be able to do that with every game. 10 years ago, it is not the same as it is now. But
yeah, you only had 2 hairstyles, afro and a fade.
Afro, a fade, or possibly braids, but they were only cornrows.
Yeah. Oh.
That was it.
Yeah.
I'm very glad that we have the ability to be more understanding that these black folk aren't just going to be just doing braids, and maybe that's for the fact of the contention between people, where it's just like, you know, the developers, where it's like, oh yeah, you know, a black hair isn't necessarily accepted. I mean, shit, even you hear all the time in public schools where kids who go to school with a hair braid get sent home because of the fact that that is not the way the hair should be meant to be kept. Excuse me.
I can tell you a story about my hair. I had to cut it when I transferred schools. Yeah, I transferred from a public school to a private Catholic school, and they told me I had to cut my locks because it was an unnatural hairstyle. Now,
Catholic school. It should have been the first red light. That's nonsense.
yep. And then when I got there, there was another black kid there, and he had, so one of the other rules is that your hair couldn't touch like your collar. His hair was like down to here, had a full on Jerry curl.
Right.
And I'm sitting there, I'm just like, hang on, I just put gel in my hair and twisted. He's spraying grease in the back of his polo, and that's natural. So that's when I started growing out my hair and retwisting it. Got sent down to the principal's office, and she told me, she was like, well, what do you do to your hair for it to get like that? Because if you put gel in it, then like it's unnatural. And I had to tell her, it's like, well, then you're gonna have to tell all these white boys that put gel in their hair that they have to take theirs out.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're saying you have to add chemicals to it, then you're gonna have to tell these black parents that their daughters can't have relaxers. Have that conversation. So it's things like that, like you were saying, it's like with the hair, it is, people might think it's minute, but like it does have like real life connotations to it. Mm-hmm. It's like we said, representation. It's just, I think there's maybe only one or two games where I could do character creation and I could have locks,
dreads, or cool pattern designs in your
Well, you know, you should probably call them locks, right?
Dreadlocks.
Locks.
I
told you why, right?
Educate me and the stream again.
The colloquial term from it came from when black people started wearing them. White people thought they looked dreadful, so they called them dreadlocks. Do you want one more fun fact about hair?
Shoot.
The reason why they call them cornrows is because during times of slavery, it's that our ancestors would take seeds and hide them in their hair and braid them so they could have food.
Favorite black character in gaming? Sergeant Johnson from the Halo series. The man, it has everything that makes portraying not only someone who is black, but to play a character that has such great strength, authority, and on top of that too, he holds people accountable. There's truth to his words, and I thought that Sergeant Johnson is one of the best black characters to be introduced inside the gaming sphere. Question is in your opinion, why do you think representation matters? Do you feel there is instances where you are not represented?
I think it matters more so not for the adults. I think it matters more so for the kids growing up, is because when you're growing up, you're formulating, like, first of all, who you are, and then how you relate to the rest of the world. And if you grow up like a nerdy black kid and you don't really see yourself represented in the external world, it kind of can start weighing on you, thinking it's like, oh, maybe there is something like wrong with me. It's like, if everyone's into this, why am I not into that? So I think having representation and just seeing all the different facets of blackness, it helps the children have more self-confidence, self-worth, and kind of just like more reassurance in themselves. I say this to Derek almost every time we talk, is that I'm appreciative of the work that he does, because growing up, I wish like I had someone like Derek, or like streaming was like this growing up, because then I would feel more comfortable in who I am, knowing that you're not alone being a Black nerd.
You actually brought up 2 points, because one is seeing yourself in the character, but also seeing society accept characters that look like you. And I think that's really important. And I just want to ask, and this to both of you, are there characters that you've seen recently where you finally gone like, yeah, we're accepted the way we should be? I'll start to see people, younger generations not have to deal with this because, stuff I went through.
Being a Black Afro-Indigenous man, being both, like in an indigenous side of things, Reservation Dogs was one of those TV shows where it felt like people finally got a chance to see the slice of life of what it meant to live in those situations. Now, honestly, I never did. I never lived on a res. But I've been to reservations. I've seen the life. I understand the lifestyle. I understand the struggles that go along with it. But seeing how the outside world reacts and or interacts with people who do live on the reservation, or just Native people in particular, and seeing those stories be told in that manner, it felt good. It felt really good. An African-American story that brings a lot of understanding on how we got here from one period to another. 1980s. If any of you guys ever watched the TV show called Snowfall, it is a story about a young man named Franklin who grows up in California, I think on L Street or D Street, I think it's called. It's pretty much before crack got introduced to the Black community. And being fully enveloped in this world where at this point it was just weed and 40s that were inside of the community as vices, until something like crack, which was made over in I think Oakland, right, and then bought over to California and then mass produced from most of the cocaine trade that was coming off of I think Albanians and the cartels. To watch a story like that unfold and tell a very genuine Black story of the struggle and uprising of something like that and how it affects community and how the government helped put crack in Black homes, it brought me to a point where I had to sit down with my father and ask him questions about his struggles. I've never seen something like that done in a way and caliber that it did to make me feel something, that I had to go and reach out to the person that was affected by this and how that trauma affected me, and being able to find common ground in my father's struggles and not demonize him for the environment that was forced upon him.
I mean, he technically is a villain. Killmonger.
That's my boy.
I grew up in a very pro-Black, pro-African family. So from a very young age, it's my parents taught me a lot about the history here and the history back home. And it was a quote by James Baldwin that said, "To be Black and conscious in America is to be in a constant state of rage." And the thing is that with Killmonger is that he pretty much embodied the rage that a lot of Black people feel having to have grown up in this society to where you know that this isn't right. Of course, with the Marvel thing, it's just there's a magical place that could have helped us. But on a more historical sense, is I mess around with one of my Nigerian friends, and I say to him all the time, why didn't y'all come pick us up? It's you knew we weren't coming back. Why did you not come pick us up? So I think that there can be a certain type of animosity with that, and just seeing just how with his dialogue, how he interacted with people. It's there's a lot of times I'm sitting there in the movie theater just snapping, just yes. It's yeah. It's you think your ancestors paid a fair price for this? Or did they steal it they stole everything else? It's
yep.
I mean, not really wrong there. But then also on, I guess, a more personal level is that one of the things that got me is when he was talking to his father. On their lip, they have the tattoo so that they can actually get into a con and be accepted. And he said it's I gave you a key so you can go back to our people, so that you could go back there. The way I drew a parallel to it is that with my name, my parents pretty much gave me a key to go back, because even around here, I live in New York right now, it's that when I get a Lyft and Uber driver, they'll see my name and I'll have a lot of people from Ghana that's be oh, are you from Ghana? It's just no, I just have it. It's oh, brother, that is a key for me to go back and like tie back into something that was taken from us. So I think with Killmonger, it's just he exhibits the rage that African Americans have living in this society, and then his fight to go and get the tools to liberate his people that's something that I can like see within myself. Now, I'm not going to go on a genocidal rampage, and I'm not going to be choking out old women, but metaphorically.
Has a question for us as well. He says, Smoke Signals is a movie my family held in high regard for Native culture and movies. Were there any movies featuring black cast that you helped you feel good while watching with the family? Cool Runnings was amazing. All black cast with, of course, the one white Canadian guy that brings him to, do the luge, but like it was such an amazing story to see something that just seems so taboo, having a Jamaican team doing a winter event, and then to find out like 15 years later, as watching this movie almost like every other day as a kid, that was based on a true story. Yeah. Feel the rhythm, feel the ride, get on up, it's pushcart time. Sorry.
Can I ask you guys about two things, a movie and a show, to just get your opinions on it? Because these are things I grew up watching. One is My Friend Martin. I don't know if you remember it by name, but when the two time travelers go back in time and meet Martin Luther King, that was something they show in school. Oh, you never saw that?
Oh, it's the animated movie, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's half animated.
Yeah. I've seen it. Yep.
Yeah, it's one of those movies they just show in school all the time, and it's meant to be kind of a more feel good, but teach you a little bit about the history. But if you haven't seen it, it's hard to judge it.
How far did they go with it? Did they go to the part where you didn't learn how to duck?
Yes. Unfortunately, it's
comedy.
Let's talk about the Boondocks for a second. We have the caucasity, all right, and
buffoonery. We'll just go with buffoonery.
And the buffoonery of the African American experience. This TV show does such a great job of just slapping it in your face, like Martin Luther King coming back to life. What a great episode. There's nothing better where he gets up on stage and he goes, look where we are, all you bunch of trifling people. I'm going back to Canada. he just leaves on the stage because he's so disappointed on where Black America got after the sacrifice of the civil rights movement, his sacrifice along with it. And
do you know what network he was watching when he was watching TV? BET.
Why is the Boondocks such an important aspect to the conversation of bringing up issues? And how is a medium like cartoons like a medium like cartoons, how is that pushing a narrative that is better than something that is just live action?
Through comedy and satire, you can expose and force people to think about things in a different way that they might not have normally thought of, or they might have kind of played around with the idea but then put it out of their mind. A good example is the episode that they got pulled from the network. You can't watch it on TV because Tyler Perry got so mad about it. It was an episode called Pause, where it's a character called Ma Dukes that it's clearly taking a jab at Tyler Perry. Ma Dukes has a production company where he puts on plays where he cross-dresses as a woman. And then they bring in the religious side of it, and he says it's like, oh, Jesus told me that I should cross-dress as a woman to spread his message. And the concept of that episode was to show the hypocrisy within religion, where it's like you're fine with a man cross-dressing because they're speaking about God and they're saying it in a manner in which it is consumable for you. Mm-hmm. But if you had someone in your congregation that was cross-dressing, you would tell them to get out, or you would talk about them or make it an unwelcoming environment for you. So it was showing the hypocrisy of that. And he got mad, got it pulled off the station. But I think like episodes like that really like forces people to stop for a second and just analyze. It's like, okay, it's like it's through the medium of a cartoon, but this is something that is like actually going on, and it has real world implications to it.
Mm-hmm.
And even within it, it was very interesting because it was on Adult Swim,
Mm-hmm.
and there were certain swears that would be bleeped out, but like on the air you can say nigga, but you can't say these other words that would like that people say like, oh, that's offensive. It's just like, okay, it's like that's offensive to other people, but I guess because it's black people saying it, that it's no longer offensive because it's coming out of a black mouth. It was like, but if it's supposed to be a guideline for everyone, it's like you can't say these words. It's like it seems like you're shifting the goal line because of the person who's saying it.
Right.
Which if you're gonna put something out on television, keep it consistent. But I think it was just a way to make the word more palpable, so that if other people wanted to say it, there was like, well, the Boondocks say it. And it's like, and I hear it all the time. It's like, what's the problem? Their last episode, there was a scene where he was pretty much pointing out exactly what I just said, and on the edited version, he went back and forth between nigga and the FAGGOT word. You could hear the bleeps on the second one, but the first one, they didn't bleep it out. It's just like, I can say this, but I can't say that. Well, I can say both of these, but one's getting it bleeped out and one doesn't. It's just like, so what does that say about how people view words that hurt us? Where in other communities do you see them take a word that has that type of weight to it and then call each other that?
I mean, do you have an issue with the N-word? Do you not like utilizing it to talking?
Oh, I say it all the time. It makes my teeth white. I understand from your perspective, because to an extent I have that perspective too. Is like, oh, it doesn't mean this when I say that. But I think that it takes a certain level of cultural brain damage to take a word that was meant to dehumanize you and then call someone that looks like you, someone that's from your community, that word. At that point, I think you're no longer looking at your brother through the eyes of an African. You're looking at it through the eyes of your oppressor. Yes, you can try to morph it into something. It was like, but it like the history is still there. It's like the fabric of it is the same. You're just dyeing it in different colors. There's a lot of communities that police themselves. It's like when, like, good example, Italians police themselves.
Yeah.
They start acting out of line. It's like it's either someone come see you or they tell you have to go see someone. And I think a lot of communities do a good job at policing themselves and saying, listen, this is what we're not going to stand for. But I think just because of historical factors is that it's hard for us as Black people to get on the same page. Since we were talking about cartoons and anime, Mr. Popo, what are we going to do about it?
A point of contention on NPCs all reaches the sea again. Mr. Popo is not the black character of the DBZ universe. We all know who the real, it's freaking Piccolo, all right? Piccolo is a black character.
He's the dad that stepped up.
I just want to say just a special thank you to all the people that came to enjoy the conversation. Thank you so much, Ashante Ali, for taking time out of your day to come and talk and hang out with us about talking about black representation within inside of media, gaming, and pop culture. If you want to listen to this man and listen to more of him, all right, you have to check out his podcast called Tomb Talks with the Pharaoh. It is amazing. The people that he has on these conversations, in these videos, in these podcasts, bring such an immense amount of perspective and light, not only to African American problems and its history and the situations and ways to move forward and to grow and to gain resources you gain to help push that narrative forward. You're working on season 2, yes?
Well, I decided to go the route of Attack on Titan. It's season 2, part 2. If you are trying to look for me, you can Toon Talks with the Pharaoh. That is on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Cast. If you want to send me questions or you would like to be on the podcast, the Instagram is T3P_podcast. I want to say thank you to both of you for having me on. It's been a great conversation, and I hope people learned, had a different perspective exposed to them. And one thing that my dad always says to me is that if you didn't at least learn one thing throughout the day, you might as well have stayed in bed.
And we are glad that all of you decided to wake up today. And with that being said, my name is Derek from Atop Derek Mountain.
Luke.
Ashante Ali, aka the Pharaoh.
And this was an episode of NPCS All Podcast. Thank you all so much again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye! If you want more mountain madness with your Arc Sage on top of this peak, consider heading over to my Twitch channel of the same name, Atop Derek Mountain. I stream 3 days out of the week where you can find me playing FPS pew-pews. I never took film school in any capacity, so I only know... Oh my god! Roleplay on Red M and 5M servers.
Dailies. What does that even mean?
And a bunch of other variety content as well. Also, I exist on these platforms too, so if you want to stay in the loop, I'll see you there. Thanks again for watching and for having the willpower to ascend!